Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
This happened when I was 4, so I don't remember all the minor details, but my mom does, and we kind of trace back this whole thing when I suddenly got reminded of it because of reading a similar story. I'll try my best to explain and add the bits from my mom's memory. We used to live in a very rural area at that time, and we owned a small farm. Most people in that area had their own farmlands, but the houses were located about 5 miles away from the area where all the farms were. It was the time when we only had one cell phone that my father used to keep with him all the time, and there was no landline at our house. There was a public telephone booth 2 blocks down that a lot of people in the neighborhood used. It was around summer, I think. There was this group of gypsies, and they were notorious for stealing the crops and would also rob people occasionally, especially women working alone at the farms. My father had a regular job besides managing the farms, so he would have to leave very early and would be back late at night. Normally, my mom would manage the farms by herself, but since the gypsies were going around robbing people, she stopped going there for a while, and I was also very young then. Most people in our neighborhood worked at their farms starting early mornings until the evening, so our neighborhood was pretty desolated during daytime, except for a few people 3 to 4 blocks down to our house. Mom was very careful about locking the main doors and also our windows, so there wasn't much to worry about. My gramps from my mom's side was visiting us one of these days, and he's like a very tall and big guy. I was playing in the dining table, my back facing the main entrance, and my mom was in the kitchen, while Gramps was inside the guest room. My Gramps from my mom's side was visiting us one of these days, and he's like a very tall and big guy. I was playing in the dining table, my back facing the main entrance, and my mom was in the kitchen, while Gramps, he was inside the guest room since he just arrived. He was maybe changing or freshening up. The thing is, Mom forgot to lock the main entrance after Gramps came in and had no idea about it. I was facing my mom, telling her about whatever little me was doing, and she was facing the entrance. And I can clearly remember feeling terrified by the sudden change of expression on my mom's face. And now that I'm more aware of the wide range of emotions than a 4-year-old, I can tell that it was a mixture of dread, shock, and pure anxiety. She left whatever she was doing in an instant, and now she was standing between me and the entrance, shouting with a kitchen knife in her hand. And as I peeked from behind her, there was a woman, and she had a sickle in her hand, and she was inside of our house. She was standing there trying to make a conversation as if that was normal. She definitely thought that we were the only people in the house. She was wearing lots of metal jewelry and stuff that the gypsies wore. My mom was telling me to run to Gramps, and I was crying, not wanting to leave her because I could probably sense a danger. It's only been like 2 minutes, and my Gramps came running and yelling from the room in the far back, telling the woman to get the fuck out of our house. She was still trying to pretend and telling stuff like she just wanted some water and that this was a pretty house. But now she was also backing away. There was more yelling and shouting from my Gramps and my mom, and the woman finally left. My mom then locked the entrance, and now my Gramps was trying to calm her down as she was shaking a lot. My mom then told me later that the most scary part was she couldn't even notice the woman getting inside. I could have been seriously hurt or possibly taken hostage if she noticed a bit more late. And the woman didn't even flinch when it was just my mom shouting at her with a knife in her hand. So she was not scared of her at all and was most probably looking for an opportunity to take her on. My mom is a small build, and that gypsy woman was tall, like much taller than my mom. No wonder she was prepared to take her chances. I started this back in September last year, but I never got around to sharing it. I am now, due to an uncomfortable situation again, so bear with me if I ramble on. I'm writing this off inedible. I have to get some context out of the way. Let me start off by saying that I live in an apartment complex by a golf course/country club on the edge of town. Since not many people live in this area, it can get pretty quiet at night. The complex is built partially into a small hill at the end of a road, with my apartment being on the back corner of the building on the ground floor. So, the bottom of the windows in the living room and both bedrooms start literally a few inches above the ground outside. There is also a trail behind my apartment building that goes through a small wooded patch. I don't have much of a view since my living room windows face a good 15/20-foot patch of grass before a tree line separating it from a few houses on the next street over. This story has been ongoing for the last couple of months, and I'm not entirely sure if this is just paranoia or coincidental. Last summer, a family moved into a house on the next street, over a couple houses down from my apartment. I've only seen one middle-aged man and a dog so far. I was taking my Shih Tzu Harley outside one day while he was out in the backyard and just standing with his arms crossed swaying side to side. He was like an NPC character in 2000s video games waiting to be interacted with. The dumpster shed area is in view of his backyard. We made eye contact, so I awkwardly waved and then just looked at my phone while Harley did her business. But I could tell from my peripheral vision that he didn't look away from us. We have the same breed of dog, so I just assumed that he was probably thinking of letting them meet sometime. But I wondered why he didn't have his dog outside with him. I just went back inside quickly after Harley was done. My younger brother lives in the same complex as I do, but on the second floor. He told me that every now and then, he'd see the man take his dog out into his backyard, but across the tree line into the complex's yard. He would then circle the building slowly, a little too close to the building, before going back into his house. In September last year, my boyfriend at that time and I split up. The night I told him to leave, I went to a friend's house to vent. I didn't want to leave Harley home alone too long, so after about an hour or so, I came back to my apartment. I knocked out on the couch while I had a black screen rain sound video on YouTube on. I woke up around 2 a.m. to Harley going crazy barking and growling. The other couch is right under the main window in my living room. Harley had climbed up the couch and he was barking at the window between the curtains. I get up just to get her down and be quiet, when my stomach dropped when I realized something. The curtains are on the thinner side, and I can normally faintly see the streetlights from the next street over through the curtains. I started getting a little nervous, realizing that there was a black mass blocking some of the lights above where Harley was standing. I grabbed the remote to shut the TV off while I was getting closer to the window. The TV turns off in the style of retro TVs, where the picture closes in on itself. And when I turned it off, the flash animation on the TV illuminated the room briefly. Well, It was enough that I was able to make out the form of someone dressed in black or dark clothes that was crouched down looking into my window. In the flash, they probably saw me too because they ran away quickly. I picked up Harley and I ran to the kitchen to grab a knife, and I went to my room locking the door. I then texted my ex asking him if he was outside of the window just then. He replied back no, and then asked what was happening. I didn't believe him because he's never awake that late, and I told him that I was about to call the police, so just to tell me the truth. He told me that I should call them either way, and then sent me his live location showing that he was at his friend's house over an hour away. I called the police and I let them know that I had seen someone outside my window. They came and looked around, finding nothing, obviously. An officer told me that they would keep someone in the area, so to just call back if anything else happened. Over the next couple of weeks, around the same time, around 2 to 3 a.m. each night, Harley would freak out at the window, and by the time that I'd get to her, I couldn't see anyone outside. Fast forward to now May 2024. This last week, I went through my storage closet and I found some of my ex's things. I was out with some friends tonight when he came to pick them up. He ended up texting me to come home so we could talk about something important. I then get home and I notice that he has a puzzled look on his face. I ask what couldn't have just been a text, and he told me that while he was loading his stuff in his truck, he took Harley out quick. He was approached by an older lady that lives on the second floor. The dumpsters is at the end of the parking lot, and if you turn right, you'll face the side of the building in the general area outside my living room window. There's a few big trees keeping the area back there pretty dark, even during the summer, and it's deeply shaded. She said that as she was taking her trash out, she heard a twig snap and then looked at the direction it came from. She said that she saw a man outside my window, not just walking around. He was up close peering into my living room, one hand up on the window trying to block the light so that he could see, and his phone in the other hand pointing inside my apartment. She yelled out asking him what the fuck he was doing, but he just acted like he didn't hear her and walked away slowly in the opposite direction. She said that it would be one thing if he was just walking through the yard and glanced over at my window, but he was full on pressing his face against the glass and looking in. My blood ran cold and I got goosebumps. I have since bought a Ring camera, which is something that I should have done a long time ago, and I will update if anything else happens.
I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. This happened on Halloween of 2013, while I was 16 at the time. Me, my sister Lauren, who was 14, and my brother Jacob, who was 11, were on our own that night. Our mom was taking care of our sick grandmother, and Dad was out of town on business. Trick-or-treating in our neighborhood always ended around 9 o'clock. Our parents never made us go to school the day after Halloween, so we stayed up past our bedtime and watched movies. However, since we were by ourselves and amped up on all the sugar we had consumed, we made other plans. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Wisconsin, but there's a lot of farms here. Our town was pretty much surrounded on all sides by them. In fact, there was a farm just outside of our neighborhood, a short walking distance from our house. Every fall, this farm would have an annual pumpkin patch, and we thought it would be fun to go check it out. We didn't plan on vandalizing anything. We just wanted to stroll around and see how creepy this place was in the dark. The pumpkin patch was situated between two large cornfields. About a half a mile or so behind the patch was the house the farmer lived in. For the sake of the story, we'll call him Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller had always given me the creeps. There was something about him that I could never put my finger on. The only way I can describe it is that he didn't seem like a real person, if that makes sense. It was like at any moment, his skin would fall off and reveal him to be some kind of alien or something. I know it sounds like a strange thing to say, but I'm telling you, there was always something off about Mr. Miller. The three of us arrived at the dark, deserted pumpkin patch around 10 o'clock. There was a series of large sheds between Mr. Miller's house and the patch, so we didn't worry about being seen. I remember that there was always a couple of scarecrows off in the distance, in the adjacent cornfields. The first thing I noticed when we got there was that there was a third scarecrow that was mounted in the middle of the pumpkin patch. I've been to this patch several times before. Our parents even took us here 2 weeks prior to pick out pumpkins to make into jack-o'-lanterns, and I never remember seeing a scarecrow here before. It usually wouldn't be any cause for alarm. It was Halloween after all, right? I remember upon seeing the scarecrow, I instantly had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I looked to either side of me and saw the 2 usual scarecrows standing in the fields. I figured perhaps Mr. Miller wanted to be extra spooky this year. We wandered aimlessly around the pumpkin patch for about 10 minutes. Every so often, I would look to the scarecrow, and I could swear its head would be positioned differently every time I looked at it. It seemed to be watching the three of us as we made our way through the patch. I brushed it off as some kind of optical illusion, coupled with the fact that I was in some weirdo's creepy pumpkin patch in the dead of Halloween night. When we approached the scarecrow, Lauren instantly became uneasy. She was seriously creeped out by the figure. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight to get a better look at it. Even from a distance, you could tell that the other scarecrows that were out in the fields were nothing but straw stuffed into some old clothes. But this one was different. A lot of effort was put into its design. It was mounted to a pole in a typical scarecrow stance. It was wearing a pair of dirty overalls with a red patterned flannel shirt underneath. Its head was a burlap sack with a jack-o'-lantern face stitched onto it. It was wearing a black conical hat with a pair of matching black boots. As my phone's dim light passed over its surface, I noticed these dark red stains on its overalls. As I was examining the straw man, Jacob, being the little shit he is, came between me and Lauren. "I bet you're too chicken to take off its mask." Me, never passing up a chance to show up my little brother, accepted the dare, on the condition that he would have to forfeit all his Reese's cups he had gathered that night. After Jacob agreed to those terms, I had Lauren hold my phone's light on the scarecrow, while I made my way towards it. As I got closer, the sinking feeling I mentioned earlier became stronger. However, my desire for those delicious peanut butter cups and the satisfaction I would get eating them in front of Jacob overpowered my fear. Now only inches away from it, I slowly reached for the burlap sack. That's when the unthinkable happened. One of the scarecrow's arms shot forth, and a gloved hand grabbed my wrist. The first thing I heard was Lauren screaming as the flashlight vanished. The next thing I heard was my 2 siblings taking off on foot, leaving me for dead. I tried pulling away, but the scarecrow's grip was too tight. I yanked and yanked, but it was no use. I then looked up in absolute horror to see the scarecrow was now leaning forward on its pole, looking me dead in the eye. I was like a deer in the headlights. I stopped struggling and just stared back at the stitched-on grinning face. A muffled voice then came from beneath the burlap sack, and what was said really caught me off guard. "Happy Halloween." And with that, the scarecrow let go. I never ran so fast before in my life. I hauled ass out of there and back toward my neighborhood. I met Lauren and Jacob outside the entrance to our neighborhood, and they were relieved to see that I was still alive. I'm so glad I got to them before they called our mother, because we all would have been in some deep shit if she found out that we were out in the pumpkin patch after dark. After giving them both a harsh scolding for ditching me, we walked home. Even now, it still baffles me to no end that someone would be out there in a dark, deserted pumpkin patch long after it closed, dressed up as a scarecrow, just waiting for someone to come along. I don't know if it was Mr. Miller or one of his farmhands, but when my parents offered to take us there the following year, all three of us promptly turned them down. I may have gotten the daylight scared out of me that night. However, I did enjoy eating all of Jacob's Reese's cups the following day.
I am a 35-year-old woman now, but this encounter happened when I was around 14 or 15 years old, so about 20 years ago now. But the memory is as fresh and as vivid as though it happened yesterday. I haven't even thought of the story in many years until I came across this Reddit channel, and after reading some of the other stories, my own personal memory of this story came flooding back. So anyway, everyone in my family, and some still do, used to see this one family doctor for many years for all our medical needs. We'll call him Dr. D. We'd been seeing this doctor for so long, he was even there at the delivery of my birth, where he held me in his arms when I was just a newborn baby. And from then on, I would see him for everything. Every time that I got sick, for all my immunizations and etc. So, it was only natural that I would go see him the day that I needed to get my first pap smear ever done. I had just started becoming sexually active for the first time with my very first boyfriend at this stage, and I had learned in school sex ed, as well as from other various sources, that once a female starts becoming sexually active, they need to also start getting pap smear tests done. For those who may not know, a pap smear or a pap test is a test or procedure done by your doctor to check for cervical cancer in women. The test is not painful in any way, but it can feel a little bit strange, uncomfortable, and invasive as it requires a swab being inserted inside to collect the sample. But other than that, it is a very quick procedure that altogether takes no longer than a minute or two from start to finish. And this last point is important to take note of for later in the story. So, it's important to note here that even before arriving to my appointment, I was already in a state of feeling a little bit freaked out and a bit uncomfortable with the whole situation because at 14, I was a lot like most other young girls my age, where I felt very awkward about growing my body. I had poor self-image, and I would often wear baggy clothes to hide any signs of womanhood from the outside world, like my breasts that were forming. So, the idea that I had to do a test that required that I strip from the waist down, sit on a bench with my legs wide open, only to have some random grown-up come right up in there and then fiddle around down there. It sounded to me like the last thing in the world that I wanted to do, and I was feeling already very embarrassed about it. And even though I was told by many different people that if I wanted, I could request for a female doctor to do the test, but for some reason, I had turned that option down, which is something that I would regret later. I guess I just thought in my head that it would be okay. I'll just see Dr. D like I always do. I mean, he's my doctor, right? I have known him for so many years, so it's only natural that I continue to see him and treat his appointment like any other appointment. And I guess I just managed to convince myself to stop being so silly, that everything was fine. And besides, he is a professional doctor who will approach the situation with professionalism and will conduct himself in a way that will not make me feel any more awkward than I already do. Well, How wrong I was. So, Dr. D tells me to take off everything from the waist down, to lie on the bed, put the white sheet over my lap, and wait for him while he gets everything together. I do this, feeling a bit red in this face, but I just do what he asks, hurriedly, as I am impatient to get this over and done with quickly. And when he does come around the curtain, he sits down on a low stool right between my legs, whips off the sheet, and looks up at me with a big smile on his face. He then proceeds to have a conversation with me about, well, I don't remember what about. However, what I do remember was that it wasn't at all relevant to the situation at hand or anything to do with a test or any medical information in relation to me or whatsoever. I just remember that he had chosen that moment to talk about other trivial things, like, "So, how's the family going?" Or, "What year level are you doing at school right now?" And things of that nature. Honestly, I wouldn't have been listening to anything he was saying at that time, as all I would have been thinking about is me screaming at him to hurry up and get it on with, and that I do not feel like having a chit-chat with him while my private bits are in his face. But if I have thought for a second that this ill-timed catch-up session would be the most uncomfortable thing to happen that moment, I would be wrong. As he is chit-chatting away to me, as well as going back and forth between making eye contact with me and then flashing me a wide smile to looking down at my private areas with a deep penetrating gaze, he all of a sudden wraps his hand right around my inner thigh, closest to where my knee is. He does so just gently, almost like he is just resting his hand there for a second, but it makes me do a little jump. He doesn't seem to notice though, and then he just continues talking. And as he's talking, I realize that he is slowly starting to circle his thumb on my inner thigh in a slow, gentle caress. Immediately, alarm bells start ringing in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, what is he doing? The action was almost like he was trying to soothe or relax me in some way, sort of like how a mother might use her hand to do small circular motions on her crying child's back in an attempt to soothe. But why? Was I maybe being outwardly obvious about how uncomfortable I was with the situation, despite my best efforts to not let it show? And even if it was obvious to Dr. D, is it normal for a doctor to do this soothing action on a patient? And on top of this, how much longer is this whole damn thing going to take anyway? I thought that this was meant to be a real quick procedure. And that's when deep down I started to realize that something was very wrong with the situation. Or that I started to sense his intentions weren't good or appropriate at all. Because he started to move his hand slowly up my inner thigh towards my private area, just still caressing me with his thumb and still gazing directly at me as he went. It's when his hand reached his destination that my legs started to shake uncontrollably, and not because he was about to do the swab at that stage, but to continue just to caress me. Not for any other reason than the fact that I was scared. I just couldn't stop myself from shaking in fear. Then 2 seconds later, the tears started to slowly form and roll down my face as I let out a little whimpering sound. Of course, Dr. D immediately noticed this, but doesn't at all stop or spring back like you would hope that he would do in this situation, as though he might be realizing that what he's doing is wrong and decides to stop what he's doing. No, he just continues to do it more intensely, and then he says to me, "Oh, honey, you're shaking. What's wrong? Why are you feeling so nervous? And don't be nervous, honey. Just try and relax. Everything's fine." And he just continues to caress me. It's almost like he believes his words and actions are actually helping me to relax, when quite clearly, it's doing the complete opposite to me. But for some reason, I don't say a word, and I don't tell him to stop or back off, and I don't move a muscle. What's even more baffling about my behavior and my reaction at this point is, I even quickly try to wipe away and hide my tears from him so that he doesn't see it. Because for some reason in that moment, I feel bad for him. Because I'm worried that my tears and distress might be making his job harder in some way by me being a challenging or an uncooperative patient. I really can't explain why I thought or reacted this way, other than the fact that I was just a young 14-year-old girl who was freaking out and just didn't know what to do in an unsettling situation, and especially because it was happening with someone that I knew my entire life and had looked up to and trusted for a very long time. Anyway, it relieves me to say that he eventually did perform the task, and that this story doesn't end with any further graphic details of some sort of sexual assault or anything of that nature. He did, however, act completely oblivious to my distress throughout the whole thing and acted the whole way through like he wasn't doing anything wrong and that everything was normal. Oh, and remember how earlier I mentioned that this test should only take usually 1 to 2 minutes at most? Well, I was on the table for 15 minutes with him, which might not be a long amount of time, but to me, it felt like years in that moment. Do you know what the worst part is? The moment that I got home to my parents, I burst into tears and I flung myself into their arms and I proceeded to tell them the entire story. As freaked out as I was, within seconds I started to feel better, just knowing that I was back within the safety net of their presence, but also knowing that once I finished telling them what happened, that my parents would know what to do to fix the situation, as well as offer me much needed comfort. But you know what? That's not what I got. What I got was being immediately thrusted out of their embrace, and then straight away got the biggest telling off session of my life. They didn't believe a word I said. In fact, they got so angry at me for being a troublemaker and making up stories about their trusted family doctor who they have known for years and knew for a fact that wouldn't ever do anything of what I was accusing him of. Then, they told me to stop crying and immediately grounded me. I was in complete and utter shock, and to this day, I'm still not sure which one is worse. My doctor doing what he did, or my own family's reaction to the situation. Both experiences ended up hurting me deeply. So, nothing ever came of the situation. I had to bottle it up inside and bury it all away, and he got away with it. The only thing I had in my power to do was make the decision to never see him again, which I haven't to this day. There had been plenty of times where I had thought about reporting him to the police, especially fearing for the well-being of any other women out there in his care. But after how my parents reacted, I convinced myself that the police probably wouldn't believe me either. If it came to me against him, I believed that I would lose, so I stayed silent. I just truly hope that nothing awful has ever happened at his own hands to anybody else after my experience. Hi, I'll get right into it. I, a 23-year-old female, and my friend 21 and female, went to our hostel in Poland, and we could not get the door to open even though we had the code. These two men, who claimed that they were also staying there, offered to help us, but we could not get in until someone else came out of the building. At first, these guys were nice, and they helped us carry our luggage up the stairs to the hostel. Surprisingly though, there was no one at the check-in desk, even though the owner specifically asked that we check in at this time. But because we already know what room we were supposed to be in, The two guys helped show us to our room, and we all made pleasant introductions. They were 32 and 33 if I remember correctly, and we let them know our age. They left us to get settled, but then we realized at this point that without being able to check in, we did not have keys to enter the building or even to lock our door. Now, here's where things got weird. We were already feeling a bit sketched out by the situation, as it was clear that the hostel was just a converted apartment. But that's what you get for €10 a night, I guess. We then hear a brief knock on our door, and without waiting for a reply, these two dudes then come back into our room to talk. The younger one of the two starts talking to us about going out that night and asking more questions about us. And at this point, my friend and I are exchanging looks. He mentions that he thinks I'm the one in charge because my friend looks young, and then proceeded to stroke his hand down her cheek. But wait, it gets better. He then reveals to us that he just did some cocaine and then proceeded to offer us some, which we both adamantly declined. At this point, I just wanted him out of the room so that we could have a chance to think, but this man did not want to leave. I finally backed him towards the door, but he wouldn't move his body so that I could close it all the way, and he kept talking to us even though I was trying to gently shove him out. Finally, I got the door to close, and then I used my body to hold it shut. At this point, my friend had tried to call the owner multiple times to no avail, so we just decided to book another hostel and leave. We waited until we heard the guys leave, and then we booked it out of there to our new hostel, and are in the process of getting a refund since we booked and paid the fee online. So, creepy hostel men, let's please never meet again. This happened around 10 years ago, give or take about a year. I just found out about this subreddit, and I thought that it was worth posting. My friend Craig and I made plans to go hang out with our friend Jeremy and his new girlfriend. Neither of us had work the next day, so we grabbed some beers and made our way to Jeremy's mom's apartment complex, where Jeremy was temporarily staying. When we got there, we went out into the woods behind the apartment complex to drink. This wasn't just a little patch of trees, but a good-sized patch of forest. For context, this was in New York State. It was a nice fall day, late afternoon, and the sun was still out. We finished the beers and we decided to go get more. So, we got to the store and get some more beer, and then we head back to the apartments and then enter the woods. This was autumn, and the light outside was right at the stage where it starts to very quickly fade. We underestimated how dark it would be once we were in the woods, and how fast the light was fading away. We planned on making a fire, but didn't really count on it being so dark when we got back. So, we're walking into this sort of clearing area from where we can choose to head off in a few different directions. We're having a good time, laughing, talking, but something not too far in the distance catches my eye. It's too dark to tell, but I swear that I can see a very large figure. No, that's too big. It's probably a tree or just your eyes fucking with you. So as Jeremy is gabbing in the background, I ask Craig if he can see something standing up ahead, and he's like, "Nah, where?" "Oh wait, there. Oh shit." We were still walking, and it was becoming clear that I wasn't seeing things. There was a very large person standing in the forest up ahead, apparently facing us. So I try to get Jeremy's attention without cluing the big guy in that we have noticed him. just in case something sketchy is going on, which I get the serious feeling there is. We tell Jeremy that there is a person up ahead, but Jeremy is in a jovial, no-chill state, and he exclaims, "Oh, holy shit, is that Bigfoot?" We humor him and we laugh, but it's clear to Craig and I that this is actually creepy and probably not a safe situation, and it's clear that Jeremy is not understanding that. It's hard to communicate the pacing of our approach onto the guy, but essentially, we had gotten too close not to acknowledge him, partially because it took us a moment to get Jeremy's attention, and partially because we weren't trying to just turn around and run like we were scared. There were 4 of us and 1 of him after all. But this was a big guy, not supernaturally big or anything, and not like he was jacked or anything like that. He was just a naturally gigantic dude, very tall and heavy without being particularly fat. And he was just standing there, in the middle of the forest, in the dark, alone. So as we approach this guy and just sort of say hello, Jeremy, the absolute fool that he was, gets way too close into this guy's personal space as he enthusiastically tells him about how scary he looks standing in the woods alone. "We thought you were an alien or something, bro. I thought you were gonna jump and blah." Jeremy minds an extra set of teeth coming out of his mouth like a xenomorph from the Alien vs. Predator movies. He was all up in this guy's face. To be clear, Jeremy is not trying to be intimidating or a jerk in any way. He is trying to be friendly and joking around with this guy. But he is literally leaning into this dude and practically sticking his hands in his face with his impression of an alien. Did I mention Jeremy was kind of a moron? Jeremy was kind of a moron. I love you, Jeremy, but you're kind of a moron. And Jeremy's poor girlfriend, who was a few years younger than us and very shy, was clearly terrified, to which Jeremy was also oblivious. So Craig and I are both standing here, kind of trying to brainstorm a way out of the situation. Jeremy is clearly too dense to get it if we say that we have to go. He'd be like, "What? We just got here. Aren't we having a fire?" And we were trying to seem confident and in control of the situation. The big guy says, "Oh, you guys are drinking? I got some drinks too." And he walks over to the tree line where he has a bag laying beside a tree. He reaches in the bag, and while he grabs a beer with one hand, he sort of sneakily pulls something else out with his other hand and then places it into his hoodie pocket. I'm convinced that it was a knife or a gun, probably a knife in all honesty. He then reapproaches us and then cracks open his beer. I glance around casually and then I notice something else. Somebody else is out here. There's someone moving along the tree line to our left, a relatively good distance away, but somebody else is here and they are circling around as if to come up behind us. Fuck this. I need to leave. Now. So I go, "Well, I gotta work in the morning and Craig's driving me home, so we gotta get out of here." Jeremy, in his infinite wisdom, responds, "What? You said you didn't have to work tomorrow." I facepalm so hard on the inside. "No, Jeremy, you must have misheard me. I said I do have to work tomorrow." And Jeremy, proving that there is no end to his wisdom, says, "All right, guys. Well, it was nice hanging out with you. Get home safe, okay?" He wasn't leaving the woods with us. Craig and I started walking away, and I told him about the other person circling to get behind us and that we needed to move. We started trying to brainstorm a way to get Jeremy and his girlfriend out of there. and we decide to call him and tell him that his mom was out in the parking lot looking for him. Jeremy is terrified of his mom. Craig explains to me, and this should work. Because we clearly couldn't just call him and tell him that the situation was not safe without him blurting out, "This guy isn't sketchy, I feel totally safe." Jeremy was very mad at us for lying about his mom, but I think his girlfriend appreciated it though. I'm not sure what was going on there that night, and I've talked to several people about it over the years, and there are a few different ideas. Did they know that we were coming back? Were they waiting for us? Or did we stumble into something that we weren't meant to? Almost everyone I tell about this story says, "You guys just accidentally interrupted a drug deal." But something about that just doesn't seem right with me. Who does a drug deal in the middle of the woods at night? I don't know. Very possibly just a homeless dude with no ill intention and another homeless dude with no ill intention. But it was a very creepy and scary situation, and I just thought that I would share. I've got a plethora of high school memories, some great, some pretty terrible, but there was one memory that has always stuck with me because of how different it could have gone. In one of my classes, I was paired with someone during an assignment that I normally didn't associate with. I gave a quick grimace to my friend in the class, wanting to be able to choose who I was paired with, of course. But then I moved over to sit next to my new partner. I will call her Kayla. I'm gonna try to make this short, but I just wanted to give a little backstory on Kayla and I that led up to the incident this story is about. I didn't have any problems with Kayla, as I really didn't even know her. I also can't really recall hanging out or talking with anyone else. She usually just kept to herself. She went to classes on time, packed up right before the bell rang, but never earlier, not even in the last period. She rode her bike to and from school, and during lunch, she usually sat on the window ledge closest to the entrance. Sometimes, I saw a girl sitting with her at lunch or talking with her in the halls, but that was it for most of the interactions she had. She didn't really do anything odd in class either. So as harsh as this is going to sound, she kind of just blended in with everyone else that I didn't associate with. So when I moved over to her, she didn't say much. We started discussing different topics to cover, and she typically just agreed with anything I chose or said things like, "Yeah, whatever works for you, whatever you want to do, that's fine." I couldn't really decide if she was easy to work with at that time or more difficult because I had to make a lot of the decisions. But when it came to the actual work, she was on top of it. We had a week to gather our materials for the first part, but she came in the next day with her information completely put together. It was impressive. I made a comment about it to her, and she seemed upset or maybe embarrassed. And I asked her what was wrong, and she mentioned something about me being sarcastic. I wasn't though. I was being genuine with her. Over the course of the assignment, we worked better and more thoroughly together, but she still didn't really talk much. I was used to at least some small talk or goofing around, but every time that I tried, she would shut me down. I won't get into it, but I will say that there was an incident at school involving Kayla where she tripped coming into school, and I went over to help her and ask if she was okay, and it seemed to surprise her that I did this. I don't know what shifted, but from then on, she began talking and opening up more about herself. I even invited her to my place to finish up our assignment and then to hang out, wanting to get to know her more. Not only was she highly intelligent, but she was also very kind and funny. So as we grew closer, so did prom. I mentioned going to it, and she always shied away from the topic. She said that she wasn't planning on going, but I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I may not have known why she was so reclusive, but she was really a fun girl, so I convinced her to go. My mom and I even took her so we could get dresses together. We had all these plans, and as we put it all together, I could tell that she began to light up more and more with this idea. So, cutting to the actual night of prom, I offered to have my mom pick her up, but she declined, saying that she would have her mom bring her and we would meet up there. I got ready to go. My friend stopped by my place to take pictures with me and ended up taking me to school instead. And when we arrived, I immediately started looking around for Kayla, but I didn't see her. I wasn't too worried about it as it was still early though. It was probably about half an hour into the dance though that I still hadn't seen Kayla. I forgot to mention that this was also back when cell phones weren't really a thing that most of the kids had. They existed, but it was more so adults if anyone had one. My family wasn't broke, but we weren't wealthy either. But the only person in my family that had one was my dad, and it was his work phone. So I didn't really have a way of calling her to ask where she was. All I could do was just wait for her to show up. I had been talking with my other friends. I was dancing, enjoying the festivities, but kept in mind that I hadn't seen Kayla now several hours into the dance. I was so disappointed, but I assumed that maybe she decided not to go after all. It was getting pretty close to the end, and my friend offered to take me home, but I actually wanted to check on Kayla, so I declined and explained why. She understood, and we parted ways as she left. My mom had planned to pick me up at a certain time, so I just decided to use the restroom and take my heels off while I waited for her. While I was washing my hands, I noticed something in my peripheral move. I was in the school restroom, so I knew that it wasn't just someone else using it and didn't even bother looking up. That was until I heard a familiar voice say my name. When I looked up, I saw Kayla, and she was standing behind me. She wasn't wearing her dress though, but jeans and a zip-up jacket. She had makeup on, which she normally didn't, but you could tell that she had been crying because it was running down her face. I was so happy to see her at first, but then immediately became concerned when I saw her state. I asked her what was wrong and went to approach her when she stepped back. She then told me that she didn't understand why I was being so nice to her because she didn't deserve it. She said that she was supposed to just fade into the background and never be in the way again, but that I had ruined that. I was confused at first with her saying this. I thought maybe I did something wrong. She then reached into her jacket and then pulled out a folded up paper. She held it out and asked me not to read it until I got home, but she didn't want to ruin my night. She thanked me for showing her kindness, then walked out of the restroom, and I just stood there confused for a while and then walked out as well. I kept fidgeting with the paper, wanting to read it but also trying to follow her wishes. I had no idea what the letter could say. I knew that my mom would be there soon, based on the time, and since I was waiting out front, my curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to read the letter. I don't have it memorized, nor do I really want to go into detail of what it said, but to summarize it, I learned that the girl that I saw her with was her older sister, and she was a senior. We were juniors. She did not get along with her sister due to how different they were treated by her parents. In the letter, she confessed to some pretty dark things that she wanted to do to herself and her sister. But then, when I started talking to her, she was conflicted. She was convinced that I was just doing this to embarrass her out of guilt or something, to get her to go to prom. So, she was going to include me in those plans. But then she decided that I was a lot more genuine than that, so she fell back into feeling like she was the person in the wrong and she didn't deserve to be alive, making hints on what she was going to do instead. My heart dropped to read all of this, and I knew that I needed to find her. I didn't want her to be alone in such a dark mindset, so I went back into the school to see if I could find her or if anyone else had seen her. I had no luck there. Then I saw my mom walking to the front doors. I was really close to my mom and I told her just about everything, so I told her my concerns and I showed her the letter. She was thinking a lot clearer than I was and then took me back inside to tell some of the faculty that was there. We then drove to her home. My mom talked to her mom and asked if she had seen her, explaining the situation. It really hurt my heart to see how little care her mom had for the situation. We just told her that her daughter, who was currently missing, had confessed to wanting to end her life, and possibly her sister's, and she seemed more annoyed and treated it like she was just being dramatic. My mom had more concern than she did, so we just left to continue searching. We did call the cops and reported it to them as well, and they also agreed to look around, but couldn't do much since her own parents didn't report it. We went home, completely distraught, thinking that that may have been the last time that I'd ever seen this new friend that I had made. That night was pretty restless for me. My mom came into my room that morning and told me that we had a message on our machine from Kayla's mom. She said that Kayla was at the hospital and gave us the room number, and that was about it. My mom, of course, offered to take me up there, and I didn't hesitate. I didn't know what I would see, but I did not expect seeing her sitting in a room, drawing in a book with music playing. This wasn't a normal hospital you would go to when you were ill, or at least not physically. However, she looked happy, and we got to talk while my mom waited outside. She explained her thought process more, and I learned a lot more about her and how her brain worked. I had no idea about her home life and how deep her thoughts went. Overall, her parents doubted how perfect of a child her older sister was and neglected Kayla a lot. She always got grades, but it was never good enough, so she tried acting out instead. But because I saw her for Kayla and not her academics or her sister, she thought that once again, she was the problem. I can't help but think what could have happened if I didn't keep interjecting into her life. This was many years ago, and Kayla and I have become really close. She actually moved in with us after she left the hospital and finished her last year of high school from home. Her parents seemed to truly not care, which was heartbreaking. I know there wasn't much that may have happened in the story, but the possibility of what could have happened was pretty terrifying, especially in the moment. That prom could have ended with multiple people dead or seriously injured. So, overall, people, just be kind to one another. We really don't know what someone is going through.
And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.